Hey, thank you, Jan. Good morning, everybody. Happy holidays. This is Meagan Johnson, and as Jan mentioned, I am a professional speaker, generational humorist. So I speak to different groups and associations about the generations in the workforce. I've been doing this since 1997. I love this topic, and one reason I love it so much is because it impacts us not just in our professional lives, especially those of you in HR, you deal with multiple generations, but also in our personal lives. However, I would say over the past, year, I've heard a lot of brouhaha about the millennials. People are talking about the millennials. And so what I began to do is I began to ask my groups to describe this younger generation. Tell me the characteristics of this younger millennial generation. And millennials are people born after 1980. After 1980, those are our millennials. And so groups I've asked, and I mean all across the spectrum of different types of professions, industries, I've asked, tell me about this generation. And I collected the words and phrases that I hear most often used to describe this younger generation. And here's that list. Bad attitude. People tell me, you know what, millennials just don't have a teamwork attitude. Entitled. That's a big one. People say, you know what, after 2 weeks they want to raise. They don't want to pay their dues. They don't want to put in the time. They complain. They complain if they have to come in early, come in late, if they have to put pants on. Poor communication skills, always texting. I mean, they'll stand right next to you and text you. And then they look at you and they say, did you get my text? Gossip, lazy, apathetic, rude. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are. You could be the customer, my boss, HR director. They're rude. Disloyal. They look at you and say, this is just a job. This isn't my career. I'm not going to be here years from now when I'm old, like you. They want the reward with no effort. They expect a corner office. They expect to be president president of the company within a month. And then they want to have fun. On top of all of that, they want to have fun. As I said, I speak to groups all over the country, all different types of industry. These are the words and phrases I hear most often to describe the millennials. Now, I have to tell you something about my list. I cheated. I didn't get this list from my audience members. I actually got this list out of a magazine. I got this list from Life magazine, 1968. 1968, describing baby boomers. Baby boomers. These are people born between 1946 and 1964. Baby boomers. If you have people in the room with you, I want the baby boomers to raise your hand so everyone can get a good look at the baby boomers. Baby boomers, let's review. Baby boomers, your man just thought you had bad attitudes. You were entitled. You didn't want to pay your dues. You complained. Poor communication skills, gossip, lazy, rude, disloyal, wanted reward with no effort, and all you want to do is have fun. Now all the baby boomers are sitting there saying, well, that's all character building stuff. That's what that is. That's all character building. How many of you are Generation X? This is my generation. These are people born between 1965 and 1980. Gen Xers, where are you? Yes, Gen Xers, don't sit there so smug. In 1998, Fortune magazine called us the gold collar workers. This is not a compliment. Here's a little snippet from the article. I love this line, and this is describing Gen X's attitude about work. Work is not work. It is a hobby you happen to get paid for. And that was about Generation X in 1998. So I like to ask people, what's my point? And my point being is we're using the same words to describe every younger generation as it enters the workforce, the marketplace, even our own homes. And what we're really describing is a youthful generation. And the definition of youthful that I use means new. They have a new, different set of experiences than you do. In my book that I co-wrote with my dad, it's called Generations, Inc., we describe these experiences as generational signposts. And a generational signpost is an event or phenomena that's specific to one generation. Generational signposts drive us when it comes to motivation. Generational signposts influence us when it comes to our expectations of our employer or employees. But most importantly, generational signposts bond us to one another. We share an emotional bond with other people that share our generational signposts. So, for example, I like to ask people, I like to ask baby boomers, when you were a little kid and your school was going to have a fundraiser, sell candy, remember that one? How did you sell that candy? And the answer typically I receive from baby boomers is they sold it door to door. And then I like to ask groups, well, how do you sell your kids candy today? Well, the answer there is we buy it all. All right, we look at our kids and say, just give me one of everything. You know, they know our credit card number. And the point being is that baby boomers who sold candy door to door, or maybe baby boomers that had a paper route, you learn time management skills, money handling skills, customer service skills. Well, those generational signposts are gone. And that's true of all of us, no matter where we fall on the generational timeline. We all have generational signposts that change, evolve, and sometimes completely dissolve. And the result is that we have conflict, and there is conflict. And the conflict occurs is because we have a set of expectations of people we work with, expectations of people we're hiring, expectations of people we are living with, a set of expectations that are in part based upon a generational signpost that has no emotional connection with someone from a different generation. Every generation is marked by what I call points of no turning back. And what that means is the way we do business, the way we communicate, it changes. And sometimes it changes so drastically that the way we operated previously becomes almost obsolete. I always like to ask people, especially HR professionals, how has the HR industry changed? And of course, the first answer I get is technology. You know, it used to be that people, had a physical resume, they might fill out an application, and now so much of that is done online. So the tools you use to do your job have changed. Just like the tools you use to do your job change, the expectations of generations in the workforce changed. One of my clients was a credit union, and I was interviewing Steve Webb. He's the COO of Neighbors Federal Credit Union. And I thought this was so interesting. He said to me, my son is 21 years old, and he's never ordered a box of checks. If a new generation of members in the credit union world, credit unions call customers members, never orders checks, how valuable is it to offer free checks as an incentive to open a checking account? If financial institutions are to remain competitive, we must change what we are offering. And that's my goal in our time together. I want to look at all the generations and what we can do, what we can offer them to remain competitive. Because it's not about alienating one generation for the other. Because as professionals, it's diversity that makes us successful. And the more diverse we are, the more we can offer everyone. So I want to take a little journey, take a look at each generation, their generational signposts, and what you can do to make each encounter, an encounter in your professional life or an encounter in your personal life, a more successful one. If you would like to contact me after the presentation, I will have my contact slide up. But I want to make you aware that I do offer a generational decoder card. It is a wonderful little, now I'm drawing a blank on the word. It's a wonderful little refresher. It is a physical card. I'm happy to mail it to you that old-fashioned postal way. If you would like me to mail you a generational decoder card, please send me an email. My email address is Meagan, MEAGAN, @MeaganJohnson.com. If you would like to receive my monthly e-zine, it's something I send via email. It's a generational tip sheet. It goes without saying I do not share your email address, but if you would like my monthly e-zine and a complimentary download of me co-presenting with my dad and co-author, please text the word generations to number 44222. Text the word generations to number 44222. All right, our generational timeline. Our generational timeline begins with the traditional generation, sometimes called the mature generation, sometimes called the silent generation. My favorite name for this generation is one coined by Tom Brokaw, the greatest generation. This generation really laid down the bedrock that our society is built on today. And as this generation came home from World War II, they began to have children, which is what I think these two people are about to do. And that is where we have the baby boom. As I said, baby boomers are born between 1946 and 1964. This generation is huge. 77 million people were born. 77 million. I mean, when we think about it, those of you that work in healthcare, you know this, 77 million people. As the baby boomers reach senior citizenship, the number of senior citizens in our country is going to double. I mean, that's like taking every single person that lives in California and every single person that lives in the New England states. That's how many senior citizens we're going to have. And they're still going to be driving so slowly. I just keep hoping we have the self-driving cars ready to go. My grandfather, he comes from the traditional generation. And my grandfather told me that when he was a little kid, his family took him out of school. Now, I was about 9 years old when he told me this story. I'll be honest with you, when I heard they took him out of school, I just thought he was lucky. But the reason they took him out of school was put him to work. One generation later, baby boomers, our entire attitude about education completely changed. Baby boomers are the first generation to ever be graded on a report card, works well, and plays well with others. And the reason this was important is baby boomers had large classroom sizes. The public education system was not prepared for all these baby boomers. Almost 50% of our public education buildings today were built in the 50s just to accommodate all these new baby boomer students. And baby boomers, in the classroom where you had 30, 40, 50, 60 kids. I actually had an audience member tell me the other day he had 70 kids in his first grade class, one teacher. It was important you all got along. And if there weren't enough materials, you were expected to share. Not enough supplies, you shared those too. Some of you even shared a desk. And the ripple effect, the changes that we've experienced in the workforce because of this strong generational signpost of getting along well with others, is that baby boomers are known as our teamwork generation. Think about the 80s. As baby boomers began to assume management positions, that's when we really started talking about teams. Having a team meeting, elected a team leader, had a group hug, sang Kumbaya. That's baby boomer stuff. In 1964, Time magazine named baby boomers the man of the year. They said baby boomers are going to clean up our cities, end racial discrimination, and find a cure for the common cold. Inside every baby boomer, there's a kid wondering what the heck happened. This guy's just wondering what the heck happened to my pants. Okay, so there's a myth about baby boomers. There's something that we give baby boomers a real hard time about, and it's not entirely accurate. And that myth is technology. Boy, baby boomers get a lot of grief about not being adept at technology. We tease them that they like to print their emails. But I would say that probably every baby boomer listening in on this call uses technology. In fact, I like to point out when I have a lot of millennials in my group, I like to point out to the millennials that baby boomers were actually the very first iPhone users. Baby boomers had iPhones before anybody had iPhones. Those of you can see the iPhone on the screen. Here's the generational difference when it comes to technology. Baby boomers, many baby boomers, want this question answered. How will technology make my job or life easier? Not just technology for technology's sake. How will this technology make my job or life easier? I had a long-term healthcare client say to me, in long-term resident care, like as in nursing homes, he said legally we are obligated to document everything a resident or patient eats, and if we do not document it, we can be penalized if we ever have a survey or we'll get an inspection. He said now the new technology, he says, and by enables us, because there's a system now where you have to enter the information on a tablet, because if you don't enter the information, you get a little alarm. He says, so it sort of takes the human error out of it. But it's explaining how that technology will make my job or life easier. He said I had to explain it and demonstrate it to my staff to use this technology. By using it, it will make the resident and patient care more efficient and safer. During the late 60s and early 70s, baby boomers really began to kind of challenge and question the rules of society norms. And during the late 60s and the early 70s, baby boomers were successful by challenging these society norms. In the 50s, classified ads were actually separated by gender. There were help wanted ads for men and there were help wanted ads for women. And in the 50s, it was perfectly legal to list the same job in both columns with two different salaries. In fact, here is an ad for Hilton Hotels. I love the job requirement: good feet, eyesight, and a trim figure. I guess that you have to have good feet. Eyesight, you just have to see, but your feet have got to be good. This is an ad for housekeeping at a Hilton Hotel. But baby boomers challenged that. By challenging this idea that about the men and women in the workforce began to open up for women. And as the workforce began to open up for women, it coincided with the Vietnam War, and the birth rate began to fall. This is where we have Generation X, people born between 1965 and 1980. This is, I said earlier, this is my generation. We are also the smallest generation. We are barely there. 13% of the population is Gen X. 1 in 6 is a Gen Xer. We were lucky to get a name. In fact, if this were the Brady Bunch, we would be Jan. We are the forgotten middle child. Nobody wants to go to prom with us. We are stuck between the cute millennial sister, Cindy, and the more popular sister, help me out with her name, Marsha. And Generation X, we're the first generation to have in large numbers both parents working outside the home. So when we came home from school, Mom wasn't there, Dad wasn't there, nobody was there. Those of you remember what we called this phenomena? LatchKey Kids. Now, I was a LatchKey kid, and I want to tell you something about being a LatchKey kid. It was awesome. Who thought this up? I want to shake their hand. It was amazing. At 2 o'clock, school was let out, and you were free to go. Your time was your own. You didn't have to hurry home. There was nobody waiting for you. We sauntered on home when we felt like it. We let ourselves right in the front door. We could let ourselves in the front door because we had our own key, a little piece of string around our neck. We'd walk into the house, and there sitting on the kitchen counter was a list of tasks that had been left by management. And here's the rules. It's a great system. The tasks must be completed on time. On time just means we're management being Mom and Dad, are due home at 6 o'clock. If they're due home at 6 o'clock, Gen Xers, when do we start doing those tasks? About 5:45, if we're planning. But the point is, we can decide when to start. We can decide when to start. We can decide when to start. We can decide when to stop. If we want to take a break, we can take a break. If something goes wrong, it's up to us to solve the problem, complete the task, and move on. So Generation X has become our most independent generation. And they enter the workforce, and their attitude is, hey, tell me what you want done, give me the tools and training to do it, and then just leave me alone. We cannot forget about the baby boomers. The baby boomers are our teamwork generation. There are baby boomers out there that like to have meetings to talk about the next meeting. And Generation X, this is before the Internet, what did we do to entertain ourselves when we were LatchKey kids? We watched TV. TV became a generational signpost for Generation X. Now, baby boomers like to argue with me that they also had TV growing up. And it's funny because you ask a baby boomer, How many of you remember the first color TV in their neighborhood? You actually have people who remember not having a color TV. I remember the first time my dad talked about a black and white TV. I was a little kid. He said, that he had a black and white TV growing up. I thought to myself, black and white? How did they get the color out? And why would you want to do that? Typically, baby boomers grew up with one TV. It was huge, this big monstrous thing. It sat in the living room, and people gathered around it, a little semicircle. You watched all what? 3 channels? And if you wanted to change the channel, what'd you do? You had to get up. You had to get up and actually physically walk to the TV. But the knob that turned that channel, that knob had fallen off months ago. There was just a pair of pliers stuck there now. And the antenna that stuck up out of the back of the TV that was supposed to give you better reception for all 3 to 4 channels, that antenna had broken off also and had been replaced with a coat hanger that you had wrapped in aluminum foil. And baby boomers, you only watch TV till midnight. I actually had a millennial say to me the other day, she said to me, midnight? She said, oh, was there nothing good on after midnight? There was nothing on. At midnight, you got the national anthem, and then you got test patterns. And some people actually watched those test patterns. One generation later, we had cable TV. And TV went to a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week experience. And the number of TVs per American household more than doubled. And then in 1968, a television producer asked herself this point of no return question. And that question was, what if we took learning for children and we made learning taste more like ice cream than spinach? And the answer to that question is a show that is still on the air today called Sesame Street. And Sesame Street took learning and it made learning fun. Now, some of you may ask a very important question, so what? What does that mean? Excuse me, I just took a sip of water. What does that mean? Well, what that means is that for Generation X and every generation that followed, learning and fun are intertwined. Not separate entities, but actually intertwined. I had an audience member say to me, he said to me, Meagan, Generation X wants to have fun? He said, well, let me tell you. He said, I am too busy to stand out in the parking lot every morning and applaud as they pull in. Now, I'm not saying that's what you have to do for Generation X to have fun. Personally, I think that would be a lot of fun, but it's not something you have to do. Generation X watched both of their parents work extremely hard, sometimes at the expense of the family. 50% of Gen Xers come from divorce. Until October of '87, Black Monday. Black Monday was the largest one-day stock market crash our country had ever experienced. And that stock market crash and the recession that followed destroyed the lifetime employment. And Generation X is the first generation to perceive themselves as a commodity. And it's not the job, but the experience. What's the experience I'm going to have working at an organization? What's the experience I'm going to have within your company, within your industry? In a survey commissioned by Deloitte & Touche, they found the number one reason Gen Xers feel disengaged from their job was because the job did not tie in with their goals. Pay was fifth, as long as companies pay competitively. But what is the experience I'm going to have? And often we become very task-oriented. You all have lots to do. You have lots of fires to put out. You are sometimes working with limited resources, and we become very task-oriented. We just think of the tasks. But there's a bigger purpose. There's a reason you chose your industry, your organization, your field of study. There's something about it that speaks to you louder than anything else. And with Generation X, sometimes we have to look at the ordinary and we have to see something different. It's about the experience. After 1980, the birth rate started to climb. This is where we have the millennial generation. Now, here's what's something interesting. We got millennials and Gen Xers. We're side by side on the generational timeline, but we have the same set of parents, baby boomers. Baby boomers are parents to both Gen Xers and millennials. In fact, less than 10% of the millennials come from a non-baby boomer parent. The majority of them have baby boomers for parents. But baby boomers, you are a different type of parent to the millennial than you were to Gen Xer. For example, we did not use the word latchkey kid to describe millennials as they were growing up. We said things like stay-at-home dad, soccer mom, play dates, family time. It's the quality of time that matters. This generation has had parental involvement. And the ripple effect is this generation has remained very close to their parents. Average age the millennial leaves their parents' home is now 26 years old. And according to a Gallup poll, 90% of millennials report being close to their parents. 90% of millennials say, yes, I am close to my parents. Compare that to 1974, 40% of baby boomers said they'd be better off without their parents. All right, I'm going to ask everybody to think about the beginning of my presentation when I talked about the total number of baby boomers. That total number, thinking about it, 77 million baby boomers. Are we ready for the total number of millennials? 80 million. The millennials have surpassed the baby boom generation. In 5 years, 5 short years, we know how fast 5 years will fly by. 5 years, they will be 40% of the workforce. 40%. And in 10 years, 75% of the global workforce. 59% of millennials have never been married. 36% of millennials live in adult households. Live in multi-adult households, and they have a spending power of $200 billion a year. Yet they still live with their parents. Nearly 80% want to work for a company that cares about their environmental impact. And 80% of millennials view themselves as leaders today, even if their job title does not reflect a leadership role. According to recent studies, and I love this statistic, this percentage, about 78% of millennials are more likely to get involved with a brand if they've had face-to-face interaction with it. And I like this percentage because it flies into the face of this idea that many of us were stuck in this idea that millennials only want to communicate digitally or electronically. University of Oregon looks at the way they were recruiting football players. And those of you that have kids that have gone through this process, you probably know this, but a university is limited size-wise of the size of a document they can send to a potential player. So, for example, if they want to send a letter or any kind of document to a potential player, it can only be the size of a standard sheet of paper. But University of Oregon wanted to do something different. And they also wanted to get in touch with this younger generation. They didn't want to just be communicating digitally and electronically. And so what they did was they identified the top players they were most interested in recruiting to the university. And then they created posters of these players. But the posters had them geared up in the University of Oregon uniform. And across the top of these posters it read, "Future Player of University of Oregon." And they're a big poster size. But they can only send things that are the size of a document of paper, a size of a standard sheet of paper. So they took those posters and they created a puzzle out of the posters. And each piece of the puzzle was the size of a standard sheet of paper. And they mailed those pieces one at a time to the potential player. And for the player to receive that final piece that would complete the puzzle, they had to agree to a campus visit. So I think this is just brilliant what University of Oregon did. Now, can we do that for everybody all the time? No. But the reason I give you that example is to think about, hey, we complain that the millennials only want to communicate digitally, electronically, that there seems to be this wall. We can communicate with them face to face. We can't have that bond, but we have to look at the way we're approaching them. University of Oregon said, you know what? We're going to come into their space. We're going to put the conversation kind of about them and what we can do to bring them over to the university. So the point is that your success depends on these people right here. So let's go back in time to 2002. And I like to ask millennials, how old were you in year 2002? And, I get ages 13, 14, 15. So in 2002, this 13-year-old influenced $300 to $400 billion of the family spending. They influenced over 80% of the family apparel choices and over 50% of the family car choices. This was often before they could even drive. Now, as I mentioned, my dad, he's a baby boomer, and we worked together and we wrote a book together. And so I was sharing these numbers with him, and he was fascinated by this 52% of car choices. He says, let me promise you, he said, when I was that age, baby boomers always like to say that, especially my dad. He always does that. When I was that age, he said, my father did not give one whit about my opinion regarding what type of car the family should buy. And he said, it would never have even occurred to me to give my father my opinion. And I said to my dad, I said, well, Dad, you grew up in a pyramid. The communication style was a pyramid with one decision maker at the top and answers trickled down. But baby boomers have brought teamwork into the family. And baby boomers have changed the family communication structure from a pyramid to a circle where there was an exchange of ideas with your kids. You talked about their opinions. You collaborated on where should we go out to eat? What type of car should we buy? Where should we go on vacation? What type of electronics should we purchase? And not only did you talk to them and collaborate, but their opinion mattered. And that is one reason many millennials feel so comfortable in a collaborative environment. There's also another reason an audience member said to me, she said, millennials are fearless. She said they can be on the job for 2 days. And if the CEO walks by, the millennial will march right up to the CEO and tell the CEO what they're doing wrong and what they need to do to improve the process. And I said, yeah, because it's no longer about a corporate ladder. It's not about climbing the rungs of the ladder. It's about a corporate lattice. And this idea that there's this elusive, top rung of the ladder, that doesn't exist. It's about a lattice. Think about a lattice. A lattice is flat. A lattice has multiple connections. And when we say to millennials, you need to pay your dues to climb the ladder, and the translation of pay your dues means put in the time, that falls on deaf ears. Because it's not about paying your dues to climb the ladder, it's about building your lattice. And I encourage you, if you interact with millennials, you work with a lot of millennials, be thinking about how can you help them build their lattice. And when we say to them, you haven't put in enough time to have say or input in the way this organization runs, that's a real disconnect because it's about hitting the ground running. It's about building your lattice. A company that does this very well is Zappos.com. Zappos is an online shoe retailer. I am a big shoe fanatic. I wish I'd never discovered this site. But Zappos.com, as many of you know, is headquartered in Las Vegas. And if you ever in Las Vegas, you have a little downtime, I encourage you, take the tour of the headquarters. This is a terrific tour. I'll tell you the only disappointment of the tour, I also recently toured the Ben & Jerry's ice cream tour over in Vermont. I thought the Zappos tour would be like the Ben & Jerry's tour where you got free samples. You get no free samples on the Zappos tour. However, it is a terrific learning experience, and they really practice this, how can we make our structure as flat as possible? In fact, they call it a halocracy. And one way they enable their young people to make good decisions about customers and about Zappos is they give them access to as many people as possible with different levels of experience and seniority within the company. So, for example, this is, and these are pictures I took on the tour. This is Tony. Tony is the CEO of Zappos. He's one of the founding members. Excuse me, I had a little dry throat there. He's one of the founding members. That's his desk, right out there with everybody else's desk. Because they want people to feel comfortable to discuss anything, different ideas, different options with as many people as possible. Also, Zappos shares that by organizing desks in this fashion, you can get more people in a smaller footprint. So it's financially smart to organize people this way too. Somebody asked me recently, they said, what are with the license plates, with people's names on them? You see those there. Zappos gives the license plate to employees every 5 years. Every 5 years at the company, you get a license plate. And then every year in between those 5 years, every year you get a little sticker like you do for your automobile when you re-register it every year, a little sticker. You get a little sticker. You can kind of see those stickers stuck there on the license plate. Someone asked me also about there in the left-hand corner, you see maybe some bottles. They asked about that. That is an open bar. So they have multiple open bars at Zappos. I know many human resource people might roll their eyes, but that's, I think, one reason why everyone's so happy when you call into Zappos. Everyone's in a good mood. This is a picture of Zappos' HR department. I just think that's funny. That's why I added the photo. Now, some of you who are maybe less, you say, hey, that's Zappos. They sell shoes. We are in finance. We are in real estate. We are, we're in healthcare. We can't just throw out all the rules out the window. And I agree. So I interviewed this gentleman. His name is Adam Browers. He is the HR director for Bethany Retirement Living. And we talk about a highly regulated industry, assisted living. The only industry more highly regulated than assisted living is nuclear. And he said to me, we have gotten rid of annual reviews. We got rid of annual reviews. And he said because the young people that are working for us today do not care about what happened a year ago. They care about the relationship they have with their employer today. He said, and we've replaced it with the stay interview. Now, the first stay interview occurs within the first 60 days of employment, but here's what I think is so brilliant about stay interviews. A stay interview can occur whenever a manager or supervisor feels an employee is becoming disengaged, disenfranchised, or maybe burned out. Here are some of the questions on the stay interview. I won't go through them all, but I love that last question. When was the last time you thought about leaving your job, and what was the cause of you thinking about leaving? Because Adam explained to me we want to have that conversation with them before they mentally divorce us. He said, for example, we had a young woman that we were worried that she was becoming disengaged, and so we talked to her, and it found out it was a transportation issue. So by changing her hours, we could solve her transportation issue. If we hadn't had that conversation, he says we potentially could have really lost. She would have already quit and moved on to a different job. Look at the high numbers of people they trust. Parents, teachers, friends all get the highest numbers of people the millennials trust. Low numbers given to music, celebrities, and athletes. Now, that doesn't mean you won't have some people on your team that will make some decisions based upon somebody's celebrity status, like this young man right here. No, you can't be Charlie Sheen for Halloween. I just love that little picture. But the big decisions, the decisions are going to impact your organization. The decisions will impact their commitment to the job, their commitment to the mission, is with the help of their trusted advisors. As their most important employee benefit, 33% of recent college grads chose training and development over salary, and 98% felt that working with mentors is important. 98%. So we have a younger generation that values collaboration. We have a younger generation that is looking to build their lattice, and we have a younger generation that values mentor-mentee relationships. And we have a younger generation that wants to be learning something new at work, and they want to feel their work is valued by their leader. Now, this kind of falls into sometimes people complain millennials always, they want feedback constantly. And I agree that I think millennials do have a higher desire for feedback than some of our older generations. A monthly 15-minute conversation takes care of this issue, that they want to be learning something new at work, they want to feel their work is valued by their leader, and also value feedback. A monthly 15-minute conversation. What's something that you're better at now than you were last month? That question puts in the forefront of the mind, hey, you know what? My company is investing in me. They sent me to that training, and now I can do this better than I could before. What are things you want to get better at this month? So what are we going to focus on moving forward? What's your plan for developing these skills, and what resources can I help you with? It's a monthly 15-minute conversation that reassures the millennial that somebody cares about their progress, it's collaborative, and also that there is a plan in place. Hey, you know what, this company, this organization, they care that I'm here, and there's a plan in place to help me with my growth. USA Today had a great article. They interviewed college professors, and college professors were dumbfounded because their students that were about to graduate college were turning in papers filled with instant message language. And I'm looking at this slide. It looks like our slide got messed up a little bit because it looks like everything is on the slide. So, for example, in a study, the students were turning in papers filled with instant message language. And in the study, the students weren't even aware they were using the instant message language. And as I read this article, I thought, wow, even the way we write to each other has changed. So, for example, you see that top line, the traditional generation. How would the traditional generation start a letter to Mr. Smith? Well, the traditional generation would start a letter, Dear Mr. Smith. The baby boomer would start a letter to Tom Smith, Dear Tom. The Gen Xer would start a letter to Tom Smith, Tom. The millennial wouldn't even send you a letter. They would send you a text, and the text would say, I'm too hot for you. And now they don't even send you a text with letters. They send you a text full of emojis. You can see all the emojis down there at the bottom. I'm too hot for you. That's a little U there at the end. So what's my point? My point is that sometimes we discount the ideas the millennials bring into the workplace today because their ideas stem from a skill set that is different than the skill set we had at that age. Hey, just because it worked before doesn't mean it's going to work this time. So just because it's the way you've always done it doesn't necessarily mean it's got to be the way you do it today. So if you have a millennial that wants to come and change things up, move it, change it, flip it, turn it, do it bigger, do it brighter, do it faster, rather than saying no right off the bat, which I think that's our instinct. Whenever somebody comes and wants to change something that we perceive already works, our instinct is to say no. I mean, can you imagine, though, if when Steve Jobs, the head of Apple, when the team first approached him about the iPhone, I mean, there was life before the iPhone, but can you imagine when the team approached him about the iPhone? They said, this is a new phone, Steve, and it's going to have a touch. You're going to touch at the front, and, you know, and it's going to be square. What if Steve Jobs said, no, the flip phone works fine, right? Rather than saying no right off the bat, ask yourself, whatever the millennial is suggesting, whatever they want to do, does it negatively impact cost, quality, safety, or service? Does it negatively impact cost, quality, safety, or service? And if the answer is no, that's your little red flag. Let's try something different. Let's try something new. Worst case scenario, you try something new, you have no change. Best case scenario is you have the equivalent of the iPhone in your industry, that you change something so drastically that the way you're doing business changes and you're more efficient, more effective, or providing better service. The millennial generation wants to make a difference in the workplace, and they want to challenge the old ways of thinking. The millennial generation also perceives innovation as being stifled by management's attitude, and that a company should be judged not just on a money basis, but also on the impact it makes in society. I have spoken in the construction industry quite a bit, and one of the complaints in the construction industry is young people don't want to come work for us because our industry is not sexy. You know, it's dirty. You're building things. You're working with your hands. It's not sexy. I said, it's sexy. It just depends on how you're marketing it. There's an organization called Tuft and Needle. They're a mattress company. I mean, it doesn't get more boring than mattresses. Tuft and Needle was formed by these two gentlemen here. They were roommates in college. And JT, the gentleman on the right, he was frustrated by when he went out. He said, it was my first adult purchase. I went to buy a mattress, and it was not a good experience. So he and his buddy put together Tuft and Needle. These are some of the ads for Tuft and Needle. You might have seen them around town. This is my favorite ad. I love this one. Mattresses shouldn't cost thousands unless you're buying like 5 or 6 of ours. Tuft and Needle obviously has a web presence, but they also do have brick-and-mortar stores. However, look at how they describe working at Tuft and Needle. We set out to build a better product and a better experience. Along the way, we found a passion for creating products of value. So they're tapping into that collaboration. We're much more than a mattress company. At Tuft and Needle, we are a collection of entrepreneurs that have come together to build something we could not have done on our own. Mattresses, boring. What they're describing, that's sexy. Every industry has that potential, but are you looking at what your industry does a little bit different? At Tuft and Needle, they're not making mattresses. They're a group that have come together to do something they couldn't do on their own. I see in construction, it's not you're providing places for people to live and work. It can't get much sexier. Everyone needs a place to live. how are you presenting your industry? This is the generation that personalizes everything. They personalize their cell phone rings. They personalize the clothes they wear, the cars they drive. Look at the way that we are rewarding the millennials. There is Angela Spain. She's with the Central District Health Department. She said, I don't have a lot of money to do gift cards or anything like that. So what I did was I created the cream of the crop board. And you see all those sticky notes on the cream of the crop board. And all those sticky notes were written by employees about each other. Here's a close-up of some of the sticky notes. Thank you so much for filling in for me on Friday when I couldn't make it. You rock. I really appreciate it. You're awesome. And Angela explained to me that once a month at their monthly meeting, she said, I take all those sticky notes, I read them out loud. She said, and then I put them into a hat and I pull out one winner. And the winner gets the cream of the crop trophy, and the cream of the crop trophy sits on their desk all month. It's a simple thank you, but what I like so much about it is it's personalized. It's all those things that people have written about each other. It's a personalized thank you. For the very first time in history, we have a younger generation that knows more about something we need to know, and that would be technology. We will bring a computer home. We'll call our kids over. We'll ask our kids, how do you install the parental controls? According to Nielsen, over 70% of the millennial generation feels that technology makes their life simpler. Over 50% feels technology brings family and friends closer. And 25% rank technology as a top defining characteristic of their generation. Baby boomers named work ethic as a top defining characteristic. 90% of the millennial generation checks their phones, texts, social media before getting out of bed, and 65% spend as much time, if not more, with their friends online versus in person. This answers the question is why are the millennials always on their phone? Because the phone has really taken their work life and their personal life and blended it successfully as one. Millennials do not see a big deal moving between reading their Twitter feed and answering a customer request. It's all one. They move back and forth. And what Joanne Van Dyke has done, she said, you know what, it used to be that the rules were that you could not have your cell phone. Could not have your cell phone with you. You could not use it. She said all that did was make me the cell phone police and pitted me against them. So rather than making me versus them, I'm installing charging stations in all our facilities. And we have what's called a free zone. You can charge your phone, your tablet, all your electronics, and you have a free zone, a place where you can use them freely. The rules still stand. You can't use them in front of customers or patients, but you do have a place where you can use your electronics. She said, because I wanted to be on their side. I didn't want to be pitted against them trying to when they're sneaking their phones around. She said, I wanted us to be on the same side. So I looked for ways to enable to use a device that obviously is so important to them. Millennials are the highest users of social media. Over 80% of millennials use social media compared to 66% of Gen Xers and 44% of baby boomers. So multiple generations use social media. Here's the generational difference. For many Gen Xers and many baby boomers, and I'm just as guilty for this one. Let's take Facebook, for example. And if you're on Facebook, please come find me. I'm Meagan Johnson, generational humorist. Let's take Facebook, for example. Facebook is great. You know what Facebook is good for? Facebook is a great way to go look at the people you dated in high school and make sure they're not doing as well as you are. But for the millennial generation, social media is not a toy, it is a tool. In an L2 think tank study, it was reported that over 80% of successful millennials log onto Facebook every day, and more than 50% are influenced by Facebook and web-based information when making buying decisions. And by year 2020, when they will be 40% of the workforce, 60% of the millennial generation believes social media literacy required of all employees, and 33% ranked social media freedom more important than salary. If you have not already, ask your talented millennials to reverse mentor you when it comes to social media. Because here's the importance of social media in the professional world. Millennials will go to your website to look at your organization, and hopefully you are listing job opportunities on your website, but they will go to your social media presence to look at the personality of your organization. And the social media presence is a place where your company can really shine through. Final generation is Generation Z. These are people born after 2002. They have been raised in the smartphone era. You can have somebody that will have never learned cursive. And just like we assume that running water and electricity will always be there, social media will always be there for Generational Z. And they also tend to be very entrepreneurial. There is a clothing store in Saugatuck, Michigan called Landshark. I was lucky enough to meet the owner, the gentleman named David, and David hires a lot of these very young people. And he said to me with quite a bit of pride, he said, you know what, nobody has ever left my job or left my company, left my store because they don't want to work here. Sometimes people's situation change, but I've never had anybody leave because they don't want to be here. And the first thing that David does different is his job application. Now this is how his job application begins. I'm not going to read the whole thing out loud, but it's this last line. I love this last line. If you're interested in meeting and working with some real fun and talented people, please answer the questions below, preferably honestly. And what his job application does is it not only reflects the personality of his company, of his store, but also he said by taking this approach, you solicit more honest answers. So for example, here's some of the questions on the job application. I love this fourth one down. It said, are you really good at anything? Please explain either way. He said, just taking a different approach, you receive different answers. Now, those of you who are maybe more conservative industries, you say, well, this is a clothing store. He has more freedom. He can do some crazy stuff. I spoke for a government procurement group. I mean, talk about procurement people have stressful jobs. But people in government procurement, I mean, they're spending your tax dollars. All they can think is the decision I make today might end up on the front page of the newspaper tomorrow. I was speaking to a manager over there. She had just hired 20 young people. Here are some of the questions she asked during the interview. Number 2, how would your best friend describe you? And she said, we'd followed it up with, can we call your best friend and ask them? So I love these examples because what they do is they say, you know what, just because this is the way we've always done it, doesn't mean we have to do it this way. And by changing our approach, we connect with the younger generations in a different way. I am going to wrap it up. We've got 5 minutes left. Time to offer for questions and go from there. Is there any questions?